The Great Hall of the Galactic Council stretched so far that the ceiling disappeared into shadows above. Representatives from hundreds of worlds sat in their assigned sections, their alien forms creating a tapestry of colors and shapes that had taken millions of years to evolve. At the center of it all, the ancient speaking platform waited. Ambassador of the Keeper species moved slowly toward the platform. His people were old, older than most civilizations could properly understand. Where other species measured their histories in thousands of years, the Keepers counted in millions. Their pale, elongated bodies moved with the careful precision of beings who had learned that hasty actions could destroy entire star systems. The hall grew quiet as reached the platform. Even the most arrogant species respected the Keepers, though few understood why. They were historians, keepers of forbidden knowledge, watchers of things better left unwatched. When they spoke, wise beings listened. "Honored representatives," began, his voice carrying clearly through the vast space without need for amplification. "I come before you today with a warning. It concerns the species you call humans." A ripple of amusement ran through several sections. Humans were newcomers to galactic society, having joined only 300 years ago. They were unremarkable in almost every way. No natural weapons like the blade-armed, no psychic abilities like the mind-touched, no massive size like the stone-skinned. They were just ordinary. General of the Empire leaned forward in his seat. They were proud warriors, their empire spanning 12 conquered systems. They had noticed the human colonies, small settlements on fertile worlds that would make excellent additions to their territory. "What possible threat could those soft creatures pose?" he called out, not bothering to wait for formal speaking permission. Turned his ancient eyes toward the section. Those eyes had witnessed the birth and death of countless civilizations. They held depths that made younger species uncomfortable. "The threat is not what they appear to be," he said simply. "The threat is what they are." "Speak plainly, Keeper," demanded Ambassador of the Hegemony Coalition. "We have no time for riddles." "Very well." His hands moved in patterns that the translation system struggled to interpret. "Never strike the humans directly, never attack their colonies, never threaten their people. They are different from anything you have encountered." The hall erupted in discussion. Different how? The humans seemed weaker than most species. They needed special suits to survive in most environments. They were barely 100 years. Their technology, while competent, was largely from existing galactic designs. Different in what way? General stood fully now, his massive frame casting shadows across nearby seats. "I have studied their military capabilities. They have small fleets, limited ground forces. Their weapons are standard plasma designs. Their tactics are borrowed from ancient Terran military texts that any being can download from the galactic database." "You see only what they allow you to see," replied. "We have observed them for 3 centuries. They learn, they adapt, they wait, but most importantly, they remember." "Remember what?" This came from Ambassador Al of the Trade Federation, her crystalline form flickering with curiosity. "Everything." The single word hung in the air like a death sentence, continued before the questions could begin. "Humans do not forget insults. They do not forgive attacks. They do not move past grievances. What you see as their greatest weakness, their emotional nature, their attachment to their dead, their refusal to accept losses, this is their greatest strength." The Keeper moved to the center of the platform, his ancient form seeming to grow larger. There was a death trap, predators that could crush their bones, diseases that could kill billions, natural disasters that could destroy continents, weather that could freeze or burn entire regions. They survived by becoming something that could not merely endure such threats, but eliminate them entirely. "Impossible," scoffed Admiral Al of the Deep Space Navy. "No single species could overcome such obstacles." "They did not overcome them," said quietly. "They eliminated them. Every large predator on their world exists now only in protected reserves. Every disease that once threatened them has been conquered. They reshaped their entire planet to suit their needs, and when they reached the stars, they brought that same dedication with them." The hall fell silent. Species that had lived for millions of years began to understand something that chilled them. "What are you saying?" General's voice had lost some of its confidence. "I am saying that humans are not builders or traders or explorers, despite what they appear to be. They are problem solvers, and they have spent 300 years in our society studying the greatest problem of all." "Which is?" How to survive in a galaxy full of potential threats. Began to leave the platform, then stopped. We have watched species rise and fall for eons. We have seen empires that spanned galaxies crumble to dust. We have witnessed the birth of gods and their eventual deaths. In all that time, we have learned to recognize the signs. What signs? Admiral Al demanded. The signs of a species that will not merely survive, but ensure that everything else exists only by their permission. The Keeper's eyes swept the hall one final time. The humans are patient, they are learning, they are preparing, and most terrifyingly of all, they are kind. Kind, General laughed harshly. How is kindness terrifying? Because, said as he walked away, when something that powerful chooses to be kind, you must ask yourself what will happen when they choose to stop. The ancient being disappeared into the shadows at the edge of the hall, leaving behind a room full of representatives who suddenly felt very alone. In the section, General stared at the empty platform and thought about the rich human colonies that would soon belong to his empire. He had always believed that power came from strength. The Keepers apparently believed it came from patience. Only one of them could be right. 6 months after the Keeper's warning, the war fleet hung in space above the human colony of New Geneva like a cluster of deadly stars. General stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Conquest of Worlds, and smiled at the peaceful blue and green planet below. Begin orbital bombardment, he commanded. The first plasma bolts lit up the night side of New Geneva like artificial suns. The main cities, New Berlin, Hope's Landing, and Port Victoria disappeared under waves of superheated energy. From orbit, the destruction looked clean and efficient. The atmospheric readings showed massive heat signatures where the urban centers had been, then slowly cooling glass fields where millions of humans had lived just moments before. Landing zones are clear, General, reported Colonel. No defensive fire detected, no military installations responding. The humans appear to have been completely unprepared. Nodded with satisfaction. 3 million humans had called New Geneva home. It was a farming world, peaceful and productive, with vast fields of grain that would feed colonies for decades. The humans had built it into a paradise, and now it belonged to the Empire. Deploy ground forces, he ordered. Secure all remaining settlements. I want supply lines established within 48 hours. The invasion proceeded exactly as planned. Drop ships descended through the smoke-filled atmosphere, carrying 50,000 warriors to claim their prize. The soldiers were elite troops, veterans of a dozen conquest campaigns. They expected scattered resistance from human survivors, perhaps some hidden weapons caches or desperate last stands. Instead, they found nothing. The cities were empty ruins, still glowing from the orbital bombardment. But the smaller towns and settlements were also abandoned. Houses stood with doors open, meals half-finished on tables, children's toys scattered in yards. It was as if the entire population had simply vanished moments before the attack. Where are they? Colonel demanded over the communication network. His voice carried the first hint of unease. Our intelligence reports showed 3 million inhabitants. We've found perhaps a few hundred bodies in the bombarded cities. Where are the rest? Captain commanding the eastern sector reported similar findings. No life signs on sensors, Colonel. No human technology active, but everything else is intact. Food stores, manufacturing facilities, even personal belongings. It's like they all just left. Humans don't just leave, growled from orbit. They fight for their homes like animals. They die for their families, search harder. For 3 days, the forces spread across New Geneva's surface. They found empty farms with crops ready for harvest. They discovered schools with lessons still written on boards. They uncovered hospitals with patients' beds neatly made. But no humans. On the first night, Sergeant N's squad was guarding a supply depot when their communications went dead. When the relief patrol arrived at dawn, they found the depot intact but the guards gone. No signs of struggle, no weapon discharges, no blood. The soldiers had simply disappeared. Equipment malfunction, Colonel declared. Continue the mission. On the second night, an entire convoy carrying construction supplies vanished on the highway between 2 secured towns. 20 vehicles, 200 soldiers, gone without a trace. The road was empty except for a single message painted on the asphalt in bright red letters. You chose this. Insurgent activity, the colonel reported to General. Nothing we cannot handle. But privately was beginning to worry. His soldiers were starting to whisper about ghosts. Sentries reported seeing movement in the shadows that disappeared when investigated. Equipment failures were increasing. Weapons would jam at crucial moments. Communications would cut out during patrol reports. On the third night, the whispers became screams. Private was on guard duty at Firebase Alpha when he saw them. At first, he thought they were soldiers returning from patrol. The figures moved through the darkness with military precision, advancing on the Firebase perimeter. But as they came closer, realized these were humans. They moved wrong, too quiet, too coordinated. They appeared to flow across the ground like liquid shadows, carrying weapons that made no sound when fired. Tried to raise the alarm, but his communication equipment was dead. He tried to fire his rifle, but the trigger would not respond. The humans reached the perimeter fence and simply walked through it. Not over it, not under it, not cutting it. Through it, as if the metal meant nothing to them. Watched in terror as they moved toward the main buildings with impossible silence. The attack, if it could be called that, lasted exactly 11 minutes. When it was over, Firebase Alpha was empty. All 300 defenders had vanished. The buildings were intact. The equipment was undamaged. Even the computers were still running their standard programs. But painted on every wall in letters 10 feet high was the same message. You chose this. Colonel tried to maintain order, but his remaining forces were beginning to panic. Reports came in of similar attacks across the planet. Entire battalions disappearing without a trace. Outposts going silent. Supply lines cut. General, reported to the flagship, I am requesting immediate evacuation. The situation on the surface is no longer sustainable. Negative, replied. We have invested too much in this operation to abandon it now. Hold your positions. Sir, with respect, I don't have positions to hold anymore. As of this morning, I have fewer than 5,000 soldiers remaining out of 50,000 deployed, and I cannot account for where the other 45,000 have gone. The communication channel stayed silent for a long moment. Then General's voice returned, tight with controlled rage. Explain. They're just gone, sir. No bodies. No prisoners taken that we can detect. No demands made. The humans appear and my soldiers disappear. I've never seen anything like it. Impossible. 50,000 elite warriors do not simply vanish. Sir, perhaps the Keeper was right. Perhaps we should reconsider our approach to the humans. The Keeper is a frightened old creature clinging to ancient superstitions, snarled. We do not retreat from primitives. But even as he spoke, alarms began sounding throughout his flagship. The sensor operator turned from his console with confusion written across his features. General, I'm reading massive energy signatures approaching from the planet's surface. Human aircraft? No, sir, I don't know what they are. On the main display, points of light were rising from New Geneva's surface. Not ships, not missiles, just lights moving impossibly fast through the atmosphere toward the fleet. Weapon status, commanded. All systems active, sir, targeting the approaching objects now. The lights reached the fleet's outer perimeter and the ships opened fire. Plasma bolts and particle beams lanced out toward the unknown contacts. Every shot missed. Not deflected, not absorbed, simply missed, as if the targets existed in a slightly different reality. Then the lights reached the ships. General felt his flagship shudder as something passed through its hull. Emergency lights began flashing. The artificial gravity fluctuated, and then, very quietly, crew members began to disappear. Not killed, not captured, simply gone as if they had never existed at all. The last transmission from the Conquest of Worlds was General's voice, no longer proud or confident, whispering, "What are they?" The answer came as a message broadcast across all frequencies, imperfect. "We are what you made us become." Emperor of the Empire stood before the assembled War Council in the throne room of the Imperial Palace. The massive chamber could hold 10,000 beings, but today it felt cramped with tension. The news from New Geneva had arrived 3 days ago, and none of it made sense. An entire invasion fleet, the Emperor said, his voice echoing off the crystalline walls. 50,000 of our finest warriors, gone, not defeated, not captured, gone as if they never existed. The War Council shifted uncomfortably. These were beings who had conquered 12 star systems, who had faced down the greatest military powers of their sector. They were not accustomed to fear. The humans must have secret weapons, suggested Admiral S., the Emperor's cousin and naval commander. Perhaps they discovered some ancient technology or made an alliance with a more advanced species. The intelligence reports are clear, replied General, Head of Military Intelligence. The humans have no allies. Their technology is standard from galactic databases. They have no secret weapons that our sensors can detect. Then how? Emperor slammed his massive fist against the throne's armrest. How does a primitive species eliminate an entire invasion force without a trace? The question hung in the air like poison gas. No one had answers that made sense. The few escape pods recovered from the fleet contained only recordings of impossible events, soldiers disappearing into thin air, weapons that refused to function, lights that moved through solid matter. Perhaps, suggested High Priest, we should reconsider the Keeper's warning, if the humans possess abilities we do not understand. Superstition, cut him off. We have built the greatest empire this galaxy has seen in 1,000,000 years. We will not be stopped by ghost stories and magic tricks. The Emperor rose from his throne, his enormous form casting shadows across the assembled council. If the humans want to play with mysterious weapons, we will show them the power of conventional force. Assemble the Grand Fleet. Every ship, every warrior, every weapon in the Empire. We will turn every human world into molten slag. Your Majesty, Admiral S. said carefully, that would be our entire military force. Every defensive ship, every patrol vessel, every transport. If we commit everything to this campaign, there will be nothing left to defend against, declared. When we are finished, there will be no humans left to threaten anyone, total extinction, complete annihilation. The orders went out within hours. Across the Empire, ships began moving toward staging areas. The Grand Fleet had not been assembled since the conquest of the Hegemony Coalition 50 years ago. It was a sight that struck fear into the hearts of entire civilizations. 50,000 warships, ranging from massive dreadnoughts to swift destroyers, all bearing the crimson banner of supremacy. The fleet gathered at the edge of human space over the course of 2 weeks. Emperor himself took command from the bridge of the Eternal Conquest, the largest warship ever built. From his command throne, he could see the endless ranks of ships stretching in all directions, a metal constellation that blotted out the stars. Begin final approach to human space, he commanded. All ships to full battle readiness. Today we end the human threat forever. The Grand Fleet moved forward as one, a wave of death and destruction aimed at the heart of human civilization. Their destination was Earth itself, the human. If they could destroy the source, the scattered colonies would fall easily. But they never reached their target. The message appeared simultaneously on every communication device in the galaxy. Not just military channels, but civilian networks, entertainment systems, personal communicators, even children's toys with basic receivers. The transmission bypassed every security protocol, every encryption system, every defensive measure that galactic civilization had developed over millions of years. It was a simple text message, written in the language of whoever was reading it. We offered you peace. We built alongside you. We asked only to be left alone to grow and learn. You chose genocide. Very well. Now you will learn what we learned from our own history. There are fates worse than extinction. The message was signed, Humanity Ascending Protocol Active. Emperor read the message 3 times, his rage building with each repetition. Empty threats, he snarled. All ships maintain course, ignore human propaganda. But the fleet commanders were beginning to report strange readings. Space itself seemed to be changing around them. Stars that had been visible moments before were gone, not blocked or dimmed, but simply absent. Navigation systems began showing impossible readings. Gravity sensors detected masses that could not be seen. Admiral, reported the sensor operator on the Eternal Conquest, I'm reading massive spatial distortions throughout the fleet formation. It's like space-time itself is being edited. Explain, S demanded. I can't, sir. The mathematics don't work. According to our instruments, portions of the fleet are occupying the same coordinates while also being thousands of kilometers apart. Emperor watched his tactical display with growing alarm. The neat formations of his grand fleet were beginning to show gaps. Ships were simply vanishing from sensors, not destroyed but gone, as if they had been deleted from reality. All ships report status, he commanded. The responses that came back chilled his blood. Half the fleet was not responding at all. Of those that did, many reported impossible situations. Ships that existed but had no crews, crews that existed but had no ships, vessels that were simultaneously in multiple locations or traveling backward through time. "This is impossible," Admiral S. whispered. "No technology can do this." "Contact Earth," ordered. "I want to speak to their leaders now." The communication came through immediately, as if the humans had been waiting for it. The face that appeared on the screen was not what the Emperor had expected. It was an elderly human female with gray hair and kind eyes. She looked like someone's grandmother. "Emperor," she said in perfect, her voice warm and friendly. "I am Sarah, currently serving as Earth's representative for external affairs. How may I help you today?" "What are you doing to my fleet?" demanded. "We are teaching you," Sarah replied calmly. "Just as you taught us when you attacked New Geneva, we are very good students, you know." "This is impossible technology. No species can manipulate space-time to this degree." Sarah smiled, and for a moment her kind expression became something else entirely. Something that had looked at problems for millions of years and found ways to solve them permanently. "Oh, Emperor, you misunderstand. This is not our technology. This is our nature. We are problem solvers, you see, and you have become a problem that requires solving." The tactical display showed more ships disappearing. 50,000 had become 30,000, then 20,000. The Grand Fleet was dissolving like sugar in rain. "What do you want?" asked, his voice cracking. "The same thing we have always wanted," Sarah said. "To be left alone. But since you have demonstrated that this is impossible while you exist, we have decided to solve that problem as well." "You're talking about genocide." "No, Emperor, genocide is what you attempted against us. What we are doing is problem solving. There is a difference." The display showed 15,000 ships remaining, then 10,000. The greatest military force in galactic history was simply ceasing to exist. "Please," whispered. Sarah's expression returned to that of a kind grandmother. "We are not unreasonable beings, Emperor. We do not wish to cause unnecessary suffering. But you must understand, we tried kindness. We tried cooperation. We tried leaving you alone to make your own choices. You chose poorly." 5,000 ships remained. "We will withdraw," said desperately. "We will leave human space. We will never trouble you again." "I'm afraid it's too late for that option," Sarah replied sadly. "The ascending protocol, once activated, cannot be stopped. It continues until the problem is permanently solved." 1,000 ships. "What is the ascending protocol?" Sarah's kind eyes held depths that seemed to contain entire galaxies. "It is what happens when a species that survived by solving problems decides that other species have become the problem. Goodbye, Emperor." The screen went dark. A moment later, so did everything else. The Eternal Conquest, the last ship of the Grand Fleet, ceased to exist at exactly 1547 Galactic Standard Time. With it died the last hope that this was something that could be fought with conventional weapons. Across the galaxy, species that had monitored the destruction began to understand what the Keeper had tried to tell them. The humans were not another conquering empire. They were something far worse. They were gardeners, and they had decided it was time to weed the galaxy. The news of the Grand Fleet's destruction reached every corner of the galaxy within hours. 50,000 warships, the pride of the Empire, had simply ceased to exist. No wreckage, no survivors, no trace that they had ever been anything more than entries in historical records. Ambassador of the Keepers stood in his private chambers, ancient eyes focused on displays showing gravitational readings from the battle site. Where the fleet had died, space itself showed scars. Reality had been torn and rewoven, leaving patterns that hurt to look at too long. "It has begun," he whispered to himself. Across the galaxy, scientific stations detected the impossible. The home star, a stable yellow giant that had burned for 5 billion years, began to flicker. Not the normal variations that astronomers expected, but something else entirely. The nuclear fires that had powered life across 8 planets started to dim. Dr. Anis, the galaxy's leading stellar physicist, stared at the readings in disbelief. "This cannot be happening," she muttered, adjusting her instruments again and again. "Stars don't just stop." But Prime was doing exactly that. Over the course of 6 hours, the mighty star that had given birth to one of the galaxy's greatest empires simply went out. Not in the explosive death of a supernova, not in the gradual cooling of old age, but as if someone had reached inside and turned off a switch. The effect on the home system was immediate and catastrophic. 8 billion felt their world's temperature begin to drop as the life-giving warmth of their star disappeared. Emergency heating systems activated across the planet, but they were designed for temporary power outages, not the permanent death of a sun. Within hours, the first reports of freezing began to reach other worlds. Within days, entire cities had gone silent. Within a week, they had become a tomb of ice, its population frozen solid in their homes, their vehicles, their desperate attempts to reach shelter that could not save them from the endless cold. But the dying star was only the beginning. The Ani Confederacy had voted to support the expedition against the humans. They were a proud species of traders and diplomats who believed that human colonies represented unfair competition in the galactic marketplace. Their support had been mostly political, offering supplies and intelligence rather than military aid. They discovered that political support was still support. The Ani plague appeared without warning across all 17 Confederate worlds simultaneously. It was perfectly designed, targeting only Ani genetic markers while leaving other species untouched. The disease was swift and merciful, causing its victims to fall asleep and simply not wake up. Within a month, the Confederacy's population had dropped from 42 billion to fewer than 1,000 survivors. The Hegemony Coalition had provided technological support for weapons systems. They were brilliant engineers who had developed some of the most advanced military hardware in the galaxy. Their assistance had consisted of upgraded plasma cannons and improved shield generators. They learned that technology could be turned against its creators. Every piece of hegemony technology across the galaxy began to malfunction in the same way, not breaking down or wearing out, but actively working against its operators. Weapons exploded in their users' hands. Ships' life support systems reversed their functions. Computer networks began deleting their own data. The hegemony's greatest strength became their extinction as their own creations turned against them. The pattern became clear to those species wise enough to see it. Any civilization that had supported the attack on New Geneva, no matter how minor their contribution, faced extinction. But these were not random acts of violence or uncontrolled rage. Each extinction was perfectly tailored to the species that faced it, using their own strengths and characteristics against them. The Hive had provided intelligence about human shipping routes. They were a collective consciousness, billions of individuals sharing a single mind. The humans gave them something new to share: madness. A psychic virus that spread through their neural links, driving the collective mind insane and causing the entire species to tear itself apart in paranoid fury. The pirates had attacked human supply convoys during the lead-up to the invasion. They were savage raiders who prided themselves on their brutality and feared nothing. The humans showed them what real fear looked like. Every pirate began experiencing constant, overwhelming terror. Not of anything specific, just pure, undiluted fear that drove them to catatonic paralysis or suicidal madness. The Empire had offered the use of their hyperspace routes to speed fleet movements. They were an ancient maritime civilization that controlled the galaxy's most important trade passages. The humans closed those passages permanently, not with fleets or weapons, but by somehow convincing hyperspace itself that the routes no longer existed. In the Great Hall of the Galactic Council, emergency sessions ran around the clock as terrified representatives tried to understand what was happening. The humans had not declared war on these species. They had not issued demands or ultimatums. They had simply begun eliminating them with surgical precision. "This cannot be legal under galactic law," protested ambassador of what remained of the Hegemony Coalition. "There are treaties, agreements, protocols for military action." "The humans never signed those treaties," replied the representative quietly. "They observed them by choice, not obligation." "But the scale of this response is completely disproportionate," continued. "Supporting an expedition is not the same as committing genocide." "Tell that to New Geneva," said a new voice. Every head in the hall turned toward the speaker's gallery. Standing there was a human figure, though one that seemed somehow more real than the space around it. The being appeared to be a middle-aged man in simple clothing, but looking at him too long caused headaches and the sensation of falling. "You are not authorized to speak in this chamber," declared. "Authorization," the human said with a slight smile, "is no longer relevant. I am here as a courtesy to help you understand what is happening." "What are you?" This came from Ambassador, who had been silent throughout the emergency sessions. "I am what humanity becomes when we stop pretending to be harmless," the figure replied. "My name is, I was Sarah's son. I died on New Geneva 3 months ago when your friends turned my city into glass." The hall fell silent. Several species had thought the humans eliminated in the orbital bombardment were simply casualties of war. To hear one speaking challenged their understanding of death itself. "The humans on New Geneva are all dead," said shakily. "Yes," agreed. "But we got better. Death, you see, is just another problem to be solved, and we have become very good at solving problems." "This is impossible," whispered the representative. "The dead cannot return." "Cannot," turned his not-quite-human gaze toward her. "We prefer the word had not yet. There is very little we cannot do once we decide it needs doing." "What do you want?" Ambassador asked. "The same thing we wanted 3 months ago," replied. "To be left alone. But since that option was removed from us, we have been forced to find alternative solutions." "You're committing genocide against dozens of species." "No," said firmly. "Genocide is the systematic destruction of a people. What we are doing is pest control. We are removing threats to galactic stability." "By what right do you decide who lives and dies?" This expression became something that made several representatives flee the chamber. "By the right of superior capability. The same right every species in this room has used to determine their place in the galactic order. The difference is that we are simply better at it than you are." "The Keepers warned us," said quietly. "They told us never to strike directly at humanity." "The Keepers are wise," acknowledged. "They remember the last time we were forced to solve the problem of coexistence." "Last time? Did you think Earth was our first galaxy?" asked. "We have been solving the problem of hostile neighbors for a very long time. Usually we try integration first. We offer peace, trade, cooperation. But when that fails, we move to more permanent solutions." The hall was empty now, except for a handful of the bravest representatives. "What happened to our predecessors in your original galaxy?" Smiled, and for a moment he looked almost human again. "They learned to coexist peacefully. Eventually, it just took a while to remove the ones who could not adapt to the new reality. And now you face the same choice they did. Learn to coexist with us or be removed as obstacles to galactic peace." "How long do we have?" "That depends," said, beginning to fade from view. "The ascending protocol continues until all threats are neutralized. The question is whether you choose to be threats or neighbors." He was gone, leaving behind only the scent of flowers and the fatting echo of words that would haunt the galaxy's survivors. Choose wisely. In the empty hall, stood alone, ancient eyes reflecting the light of dying stars. The galaxy was burning, and the humans had only just begun to solve their problem. 6 months had passed since the ascending protocol began, and the galaxy was a very different place. Where once hundreds of species had competed for resources and territory, now only 43 remained. The others had not simply been destroyed, they had been edited out of existence so thoroughly that most beings could barely remember they had ever existed at all. The survivors gathered in the rebuilt Galactic Council chambers on the neutral world of Sanctuary. The hall was smaller now, designed for the reduced number of species that remained. Each representative sat in uncomfortable silence, knowing they were there not as equals in a galactic community, but as subjects awaiting judgment. Ambassador of the Keepers sat in his designated place, ancient eyes reflecting the weight of eons. His people had survived, but only because they had tried to warn the galaxy of what was coming. Even so, he could feel the change in the universe itself. Reality had been altered at fundamental levels. The laws of physics now included clauses that had never existed before. They had survived because they had abstained from the vote to support the expedition. Their crystalline forms flickered nervously as they contemplated their near extinction. A single vote the other way, and they would have joined the growing list of species that no longer existed. The Trade Federation had survived because their support for they had been purely economic, selling them supplies for defensive purposes. They learned that intentions mattered less than actions, but economic support was judged less harshly than military cooperation. Of the great powers that had once dominated galactic politics, only fragments remained. The Hegemony Coalition had been reduced to 3 worlds with a few million survivors. The Deep Space Navy existed now as a handful of ships whose crews had been off-duty when the extinctions began. The mighty empires that had carved up the galaxy between them were memories kept alive only in historical databases. A soft chime announced the arrival of the human representative. Sarah walked into the chamber as she had so many times before, a pleasant elderly woman with gray hair and kind eyes. She had attended diplomatic functions for 30 years, been invited to countless parties, shared meals with beings who were now dust floating in space. She took her place at the speaker's platform and looked out at the assembled survivors with the expression of a teacher addressing a class of particularly slow students. "Good morning," she said warmly. "I hope you are all well." The words hung in the air like a threat. Several representatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Being addressed kindly by a human had become one of the most terrifying experiences in the galaxy. "I know this has been a difficult time for all of you," Sarah continued. "Change is never easy, especially when it happens quickly, but I think we can all agree that the old system was not working very well." Ambassador of what remained of the Hegemony Coalition found his voice first. 18 species are extinct," he said shakily. "Trillions of beings have died. How is this an improvement?" Sarah's smile never wavered. "I prefer to think of it as removing obstacles to peace. The species that are no longer with us all shared a common characteristic. They believed that might makes right. They thought that superior weapons or larger fleets gave them the authority to take whatever they wanted from others." "And you proved them wrong by using superior might to eliminate them," replied. "No," Sarah said patiently. "We proved that true power is not about weapons or fleets. It is about the ability to reshape reality itself to solve problems. What we did to those species was not conquest. It was problem-solving." The Keeper spoke for the first time. "What you did was unprecedented. You violated the fundamental laws of existence itself." "We improved them," Sarah corrected. "The old laws were inefficient. They allowed for too much chaos, too much waste, too much unnecessary conflict. The new laws are much better." "You cannot simply change the laws of physics." "Can't we?" Sarah gestured, and the chamber's walls became transparent. Outside, the stars were visible, but they were wrong. They moved in patterns that should have been impossible, orbiting points of space that contained nothing visible. Reality itself had been redesigned. "We found the universe's source code and made some updates. Nothing dramatic, just quality of life improvements." The truth hit the assembled representatives like a physical blow. The humans had not just won a war or conquered territory. They had rewritten the fundamental nature of existence itself. "What do you want from us?" asked the representative of the Trade Consortium, one of the few major powers to survive the purge. "The same thing we have always wanted," Sarah replied. "Peace, cooperation, a galaxy where beings can live and grow without fear of their neighbors deciding to destroy them for profit or sport." "And if we refuse?" Sarah's expression became thoughtful. "That would be unfortunate, but I don't think you will refuse. You have seen what happens to species that choose conflict over cooperation. You are all intelligent beings. You will make the correct choice." "Which is?" "Surrender your militaries, disband your conquest fleets, accept human oversight of your governments. Allow us to review your laws and customs to ensure they promote harmony rather than conflict." The chamber erupted in angry voices. Representatives shouted about sovereignty and independence and the right to self-determination. Sarah waited patiently for them to exhaust themselves before continuing. "I understand your concerns," she said when the noise died down. "No species likes to give up their independence, but you must understand independence is what created this problem in the first place. When beings are free to make their own choices, some of them choose violence. This leads to conflict, which leads to war, which leads to extinction." "You're talking about slavery," declared. "I prefer to think of it as guidance," Sarah replied. "You will still govern your own worlds, still maintain your own cultures, still live your own lives. You will simply do so under the supervision of beings who have proven capable of maintaining galactic peace. By committing genocide. By solving problems permanently." Sarah's voice remained patient, but something in her eyes suggested that patience had limits. "The previous system allowed for endless cycles of war and suffering. Species would fight, make peace, recover, and fight again. Very inefficient. Our system ends those cycles. Ambassador leaned forward in his seat. What you are describing is not peace, it is domestication. Sarah's smile brightened. Exactly, you understand perfectly. Just as humans domesticated the dangerous predators on Earth, we will domesticate the dangerous species in this galaxy. Those who can adapt to peaceful coexistence will be cared for and protected. Those who cannot. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. And if we agree to your terms, asked the representative, then you will live in a galaxy without war, without conflict, without the constant fear of extinction. Your children will grow up never knowing the terror of enemy fleets appearing in their skis. Your resources will be allocated efficiently rather than wasted on military buildup. You will be free to pursue art, science, and philosophy without worrying about your neighbors plotting your destruction. Under human supervision. Under human protection, Sarah corrected. We are very good at taking care of things that belong to us. The chamber fell silent as the representatives contemplated their situation. They could choose submission and live as pets in a human-controlled galaxy, or they could choose resistance and join the 18 species that no longer existed. How long do we have to decide? Asked. Oh, you have already decided, Sarah said cheerfully. The moment you chose to attend this meeting rather than preparing for war, you demonstrated that you understand the new reality. You are all very intelligent beings. You know there is only one logical choice. One by one, the representatives began to stand, not in defiance but in acknowledgement. They were first, their crystalline forms flickering in what their species considered a formal bow. The Trade Consortium followed, then the surviving hegemony worlds, then the remnants of the Deep Space Navy. Within minutes, every species in the galaxy had formally surrendered their independence to human oversight. Excellent, Sarah said, clapping her hands together like a pleased grandmother. I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship. We have so much to teach you about living in harmony. Ambassador was the last to stand. As he rose from his seat, he looked directly at Sarah and spoke the words that would become the galaxy's new motto. We understand now, we are no longer predators, we are pets. Sarah's smile was warm and genuine. The best pets, she assured him. We will take very good care of you. After all, we learned so much about proper care from watching how you treated your own conquered peoples. Outside the chamber, the reshaped stars continued their impossible dance, following laws of physics that now included provisions for human oversight. The galaxy had been domesticated, its wild species tamed and collared, free to live and grow within the boundaries set by their new masters. The age of conquest was over. The age of human guidance had begun. And somewhere in the depths of space, other galaxies continued their ancient cycles of war and destruction, unaware that humanity was already on its way to solve their problems as well.